Okay, I have not done this in a minute. Many of you may know, give me 1 second. Many of you may know that I'm actually in a training right now, so I've been swamped. But I spoke with a sister earlier this week, and she shared some words that she was looking over for a study that she was going to do for a group. And once she shared them with me, it was like all of the stuff that had been like on my mind and everything that seemed important just all of a sudden didn't seem so important anymore. And I knew, one, I get you guys' messages and I'm working through my emails and I'm refocusing for myself what is a priority and what is important. Not that I wasn't studying or not that I wasn't doing things, it's just that there are things that we still, as a nation of people, are still grasping and understanding because I'm still doing the same thing, and I hope that many of you are too. So today we're going to look at 2 words, and I have my notes because this one is kind of cool. We're looking at 2 words. So we've got the words holy and righteous. And the thing that stood out to me the most, that even made me think to dive into this again or look at it a different way, because I felt like I understood or had a good grasp of what these words really meant, was that I guess not knowing the action form behind these Hebrew words literally can make it difficult to really understand what we're supposed to be doing as Hebrews. And so often I get messages or questions about how should I keep the Shabbat? How should I do this? How should this look? How should that look? And I'm still working through it myself. What I'm noticing is we're still dealing very Western. We want to know the how before we actually start doing it to really understand how we're supposed to be doing it, because it happens in a process. The way the Hebrews thought was that as you do, you learn. Learning wasn't static. Learning wasn't sitting in a classroom with someone talking at you and you grasping these things. It was actually taking that first step and walking with the person or with the teacher or in the way that you were trying to grow. And then as you walked in that way, you would be gathering and garnishing and gleaning information that would make that walk more understandable. And I think what I saw was the tragedy of catching this information late or not being fully in while you're walking, is that you will not gather the information if you don't start walking, or if you convince yourself of what you don't have to do or what you shouldn't do, or you're trying to pick apart the walk of your culture. Then eventually you will fail at your culture and thus failing at being a disciple of Yah, because everything is walking and Him giving you the tools and the things you need as you walk. There's a term, and it's very theological, so bear with me as I show you exactly what I mean, but it's the term of progressive revelation. Like, it happens, and I'll make it concrete so that it isn't confusing. When you have a child, as a mother, or as a child who had a mother or parents, you didn't know everything about your mother the day you were born. You knew very, very basic things about your mother. You knew that your mother, as an infant, was the person that provided food, and so you'd be darned if that person left a room or got away from you, because you didn't understand how you would be able to sustain yourself without that person being in close proximity to you. But as you begin to grow older, what you begin to realize is that your parent or your mother or your sustainer could take time away and go and do things because you had been equipped to, let's say, go to the refrigerator and grab a juice box if you got thirsty. And then the older you get, you begin to internalize the things and you begin to watch your parent or your mother or your sustainer, and you notice and you begin to pick up their behaviors that then made them successful at parts of their life, and then you begin to mimic those. And then there becomes a time when you become an adult, and then you are supposed to be the physical representation of those things that you gathered and gleaned from your parent. So if you never walked with a parent, or if you never walked with a sustainer or a mother, then it is very difficult to know how to be that to someone else or how to carry that out. So back to my initial point, which is the tragedy of not walking in your lifestyle, in your culture, is that very much of a lot of what you learn, much of what you learn in this walk happens by walking alongside your sustainer. So a lot of the questions or a lot of the things that people are unsure about is because we're trying to intellectually garnish the information that only comes from walking out these things. We have a very, and still do have a very Western idea of what Yah's expectation of us is as a people. He's not asking us to garnish intellectual or to gather or to glean intellectual knowledge in order to follow him. Once I have my intellectual knowledge right, then I will be able to follow Yah successfully. That's, excuse me, it's not how a parent works. I know you don't have the intellectual capacity at 3 years old to follow me properly. So then the time I spend with you and the time you choose to spend with me is very, very important. Walking out what I want you to do. So before I really dive into this, because it really goes exactly with what I'm dealing with, we've been walking in a particular way. And now we're trying to intellectually obtain the walk in our culture or with Yah, and it doesn't work that way. As a person who grew up in a predominantly Western and Anglo society here in America, where I was walking in the culture of the people, I wasn't taught Christmas intellectually. I was taught Christmas by walking in the way of my quote-unquote foreparents, who happen to be my oppressors, who taught it to my foreparents, and then it was taught to me. I walked in it. That is why it's difficult for people to come out of it, because they have walked in it. They have been taught from very small how to do these things without being intellectually instructed on how to do them. They were done and they were made fun, and when you made mistakes and when you bought I'm trying to think of something that you don't cross up in the laws of Anglo culture. When you bought a Thanksgiving decorations for Christmas, nobody gave you an intellectual reason why it didn't work. They just were like, ha ha ha, that's very funny. How about you switch those up and put red and green and lights because it's actually Christmas. You were walking in the way, and as you were walking, you were being instructed on how to carry out the laws of your oppressor. So when you're walking with Yah, you're trying to take the approach of the intellectual Western society, where actually your Western society taught you in a very Hebraic way how to carry out the tenets and those things of their culture. So when I show you the difference and the difference and the similarities in these words, I want you to really think about how you have been walking in the way of your oppressor's religion, how you have been walking in the way of Western society, and how we're not asking for intellectual reasons why you shouldn't give tithes or why you were walking in the way, and you were starting to understand or not understand the benefits of the way you were walking. By walking in it, you were able to come out of it because you saw that the walk and the direction didn't line up. Well, it's the same way with Yah. So I just want you to really think about that, because you're trying to people in this walk are doing to teachers and other people what they should have done in their former walk, their former way, and they should be doing and walking in this way. But I'm now required to give most of you intellectual proof for why you should walk, but you were walking with humility and with passion in the wrong direction. And what I'm going to show you is that you were doing the same exact thing, and it needs to translate over in order to really understand how this walk is supposed to be carried out with the mandate as a Hebrew of being holy and righteous. Okay, that was a very long intro. All right, I'm gonna give you these 2 words. Let me switch hands. So the 2 words in Hebrew, and also for people who are asking about Hebrew, I am going to do some basic Hebrew videos, but what I've learned also about walking, and even in my training as an educator, is that how you learn something is not also intellectual. It's by being constantly immersed in it. And so a lot of what I'm going to be doing, and as far as teaching Hebrew and grammar, is going to obviously be in the same way that I would probably teach my students. So it's going to be in an immersion style process where the more you gather vocabulary and you hear these words and you hear them being defined, you hear them being used, and then you begin using them, they will become second nature, and you will understand why certain words mean certain things and why certain combinations mean certain things. So this where I'm going to show you what these words mean. I'm going to give you the roots, and then I'll show you what the words mean. I'm actually also going to do a quick pause and plug in my camera. So just give me 1 second so I don't die on you guys. Okay, so the Hebrew word for righteous is the Hebrew root, and is zadi. What's a long dalet kof. Hebrew word for holy is kof dalet shin. Okay, so without even knowing Hebrew, you can immediately see some similarities in these words. There are 2 words, or 2 letters, that are similar in both words, and they are these 2. So, the kof dalet appears in both words. The common root of these 2 words, and this is going to pretty much give you most of what I'm going to talk about, means this word right here, kof dalet, which are the common roots in these 2-letter roots, parent roots. It literally means the bowing of the head in respect as showing the crown or the scalp to another. Okay, so this is the crown or the top of the head. So both of these have that in common, okay? This word over here, though, kodesh, is one of these words that used to confuse me all the time, because kodesh and kodesh, so kof dalet shin, has a dual meaning, and I could not, for the life of me, understand how this word had this meaning. So obviously most of us know it as set apart and holy, okay? But this word also is the word for prostitute. Prostitute, okay, right. So immediately I was like, how can kodesh, something that is directly related to being set apart and holy, also translate into the word prostitute? So I'm going to give you a third word that's not necessarily one from these 2, but it's going to make this all make sense. So the word for worship in Hebrew is samek gimel dalet, saged or sagud. And it means to bow down, fall down, or prostrate oneself. So most of the time, because of our Western society, we view the term prostitute as literally always in the sense of somebody who is either selling their body for money or whoring themselves, which is an accurate definition. But we never take into consideration that you can be set apart to Yah or set apart to falsehood, paganism, idolatry, and false worship. And because there are other terms for worship, but really there's really only one term for worship. When you are set apart to Yah, then your worship goes to Yah. When you are set apart to idolatry, right, or spiritual prostitution or physical prostitution, then your worship and worth goes to that thing, right? So when you're holy or set apart, you can literally be holy and set apart to falsehood, which was always something that bothered me and that I constantly still struggle with for people who are really, really sold out to what they believe, even if it's not true. And so then we get into this argument of ambiguity that is, that's what they believe, and it's okay, and that's their way and their path, right? And so I'm starting to understand, though, that if you are set apart, right, to falsehood, you are still participating in full worship, because what you've done is you've taken the worship of the set apart and the holy one, translated it into idolatry, and then began to worship and bow down and fall down and lie prostrate to that which you have placed your worship or faith into. And literally, it will feel like it's right. That's the thing that's very interesting. Okay, I have the other words. Let me erase some of this. I got a big one. All right, so you'll see how these connect when I give you righteousness. So we know that these two-letter roots go together. If you need to pause any of this, this video will be uploaded, so you can always go back and kind of play with those words, because if you follow this channel, you know that I give you things, but I also want you to go ahead and explore them on your own. So because of that, let me give you those your strong numbers for those of you who use Strongs. And then for those of you who have the Ancient Hebrew Lexicon, the Bible, which you can download from Her Royal Roots under books or resources, that's the number for that. So this is the Hebrew Strong's number, which will give you a kind of a basic definition, but I always recommend taking it a little bit further, especially for you who are doing Paleo and Pictographical Hebrew, to understand these words. The Ancient Hebrew Lexicon is the better source. So Ancient Hebrew Lexicon for Kodesh is 2700, and then the Hebrew Strong's is 6942. All right, let me switch over. Now we have the word righteous. Okay, so the word righteous is also a word that has the same root that we talked about, to bow down, but has a zadi in front of it, which kind of changes, which very much changes the meaning of the word. This word literally means one who is upright or righteous is one who walks in the straight path. So this one has to do with being set apart to a path, right? Righteousness has to do with somebody who walks in the straight path. So while you could be holy and take your holiness and use it toward, set apart yourself toward idolatry and prostitution and all these other things, because that is this word has a duality. It means to be set apart to something. When you couple holiness with righteousness, it solidifies and gives you a concrete for how and to what. So righteousness deals with walking in the straight path. So righteousness coupled with holiness is not something that we see that can be translated over. So in In modern day westernized religion, you can have holiness, but you don't necessarily have to be righteous. Like, you can literally be Kodesh in one form or another that I showed you, and it not be coupled with what Yah considers to be righteous. He also considers a prostitute in its function to be Kodesh because it's set apart to its idolatry and to its sexual immorality. But with righteousness, there is a straight path that is walked in. So it's not merely enough to be Kodesh if you're not righteous. This is probably going to anger a lot of people. But nobody cares if you're born a Hebrew and you're set apart from birth if it's not coupled with righteousness. Say it again. It doesn't matter if you know that you're a Hebrew and if you are not walking on the straight path. Back to my original point. My original point was you are intellectually garnishing knowledge before you act on walking in the straight path, or you're changing the path without having walked in it. I'm not making this about this topic, but I am going to mention it. This idea of gathering things from our culture, yet you've only lived in our culture for 5 years or 6 years or 2 years or 1 year, and saying that you're walking in the straight path because that's what people in our culture did, does not constitute righteousness. Just because it's a part of our culture and you want to grab it, doesn't mean you grab it without first walking it out and see if it works functionally. A lot of people are giving people intellectual knowledge on how something can work and haven't lived long enough and walked long enough in the way of this culture to see if that was actually something that was the straight path, or if it was something that was just a cultural practice. And that goes for a lot of things. So don't just think of one thing in your head that just fits you, but it means everything in its totality, until we have walked long enough in our culture. And really it's difficult to really give people instruction on things that are extra biblical or other things until we have walked them out. And it's very difficult to walk out in fullness a lot of the things that people have begun to add as burdens to our people, especially our women within our culture, without living in a land where those things can actually function properly, and without a lot of men and women having to transform minds that come with having to do and assimilate into a lot of the things that we have not been walking in for a very long time. Okay, so going back to that. As a Hebrew, you are born Kodesh. You are born set apart. Yah literally said in, let me read these. I have like a couple of verses that are very, that maybe prove this. So Deuteronomy 33:3. Try to pull it up, sorry. So Deuteronomy, and then my phone died. Okay, so Deuteronomy 33:3 speaks about this whole idea of being set apart. You are set apart. I've set you apart. Why? Because you're supposed to walk in this straight path in order to draw people onto the straight path. So you can't just be holy and then define what you feel like is holy without walking in the straight path, because it is our Kodesh job, our set apart job, to walk in righteousness, because that's what draws people in. Just being Hebrew and just letting people know that you're a Hebrew, but then still keeping, and I hate, still keeping, trying to find a word, indignant ways that are perpetuated in Western culture through media and television only makes you Kodesh. It only makes you set apart, but you're not walking in the way, because that is not what is being perpetuated throughout Scripture as what our culture is. Okay, I'm going to give you this idea of righteousness comes with a path. Jeremiah 6:16 tells us to walk in, stand in the way and find the ancient path and walk in it. That's the idea of righteousness. All of our ancestors who were considered righteous were walking a particular path. Because my phone died, I'm going to give you the verses and you can look them up. Amaziah didn't walk wholeheartedly with Yah, but he said he did what was right in the sight of Yah. So you can walk in righteousness, be set apart, walk in righteousness, but deviate from the path. But it could still be considered walking in the right way because you're walking in the law, statutes, and commandments. But it wasn't wholeheartedly. Okay, so that's 2 Chronicles 2:25 and 2. 2 Kings 22 and 2, Josiah walked righteously, straight path. Part of walking righteously means getting rid of the idols, no idolatry. So to be Kodesh can be a duality. So you can be Kodesh and still be prostituting on the righteous path, which a lot of our kings did. They kept the idolatry, yet we're trying to function as Hebrews. It doesn't work like that. So a Josiah and a Hezekiah would be considered Kodesh to Yahuwah, walking in the righteous path, and part of walking in the righteous path is rejecting the duality of being Kodesh, which is the idolatry and the prostitution and doing the things of your own way. Many of us are still in the phase where we're coming to the knowledge of this truth, but it's difficult for us to give up the idolatry, the prostitution, both physical and spiritual, because the righteous path is a straight path, and narrow is the way, and straight, and the gate is small, and it's hard to get in when you have to give up this, okay? Then in 2 Kings 18 and 3, we also see the righteousness fully carried out. So go back and read these stories. But what set them apart to righteousness was the removal of idolatry. And idolatry is not only Christmas and Easter, but it's also those idols that you set up in your own heart that you're choosing to bring on the righteous path. As women, we see it happen with Raquel or Rachel, where she really wanted to have a baby. So she grabbed fertility idols from her father's house, who was a Hebrew, by the way, and literally put them under her trunk, and it really jacked her up along the way. Yet, she was walking the right path with Jacob, but at the same time, she wanted to bring her prostitution or idolatry, or the way that she saw that she was supposed to worship Yah, into the path. And I'm saying that because I have a lot of sisters who are in their quest for holiness and righteousness, bringing other things into their walk that are not necessary. Because if you walked on the path, you would see that Yah would give you all the things that were necessary in order to keep on the path. But because we don't feel like we felt when we were Kodesh in the lower region, and that was out here, I mean, in the prostitution or an idolatry, then we try to garnish that feeling and bring it into the walk. We can't do that. What we're doing is being like children, and the Hamashiach tells us that, to walk like children and be in this walk like a little child, because they are dependent on the sustainer in order to give what they need in order to walk out this Kodesh and Zadok walk, okay? Then Judges 2:11 talks about the opposite of that. Those who are Kodesh doing what is evil. 2 Kings 21 and 2 also talks about that same thing. Now, when we deal with this righteousness, the Hamashiach says something very interesting about righteousness that I did not understand until I got to this point. And it's Matthew 5 and 20. And the Hamashiach says, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the Pharisees, then you're not even going to make it. And immediately in our brains, because we're Western, we think linear. We're like, oh, the Pharisees were wicked though, so this must be like some kind of thing that makes sense but doesn't make sense. Literally what he was saying is, they are, although they are bringing things into the path, they are operating Kodesh and righteous because they're walking in the path. The reason why yours has to exceed it is because the prostitution, I'm crossing out because there was something down there before, the prostitution and the idolatry and your own way cannot be added into the walk. You literally have to exceed them by getting rid of those things of idolatry and false worship, and literally being Kodeshia and walking in the straight path. The straight path is narrow. What he was saying is they're still walking on the path, but this path gets narrower, and a lot of people are not willing to give up their personal convictions about even this walk in order to truly walk upright and righteous. Okay. And then I'll just give you 2 verses. So it's Deuteronomy 14 and 2 And then the last one will be, and I'll finish with this one, 1 Peter 2:9. And it really talks about this call of righteousness. And this made so much sense. It says, you are a holy nation, you are a set apart people. And why, though? It tells you why. Because you are set apart to walk circumspect to Yah, meaning closely, just like little children, so that as he feeds you and grows you, you become a physical example of what it means to be holy and righteous without the negative, so that we can draw people in. Our job is not to be a nation on an island. Remember, the Hebrew people were never a nation on the island, on an island, not on the island, on an island. And I don't mean island like they lived on an island. I mean, they were not a isolated people. They were constantly brought in and through other cultures, whether it was by idolatry or not. And people were allowed to come into the fold. But we had to be living holy and righteous without idolatry and prostitution, so that we could actually draw them. Scripture literally talks about the Gentiles being drawn in because of our holiness and righteousness. But if we are only set apart, meaning we only know that we are Hebrews, and that's the only thing that we beg, but we never get to the righteous right walk, then we are not carrying out our mission still, and that's why we are still in captivity. Until we become a light, and until we fully embrace and understand what it means to be holy and righteous, and how we are supposed to govern and live, and to be a ensign, literally, to the Gentiles, what Scripture says, and to our own people, then we're not going to get it. You cannot come in with the things that you have garnished from Christianity. You cannot also take the things that you hated and bash something and then expect people to want to come in. Our job is not to, how do I say it? Our job is not, I'll switch it. Whenever you give attention and power to something, and whenever you give attention to something, you are still giving it power. So if you have people who are caught up, and if they are Hebrews and they are Kodesh, right? But they are caught up in paganism, it's just like a sister or a brother who's stuck with that girl that everybody knows is no good. She's sleeping with his friends, she's doing all these things, but every single time you focus your energy in on that person, this person gets closer and closer and closer and closer. Because why? You are giving the enemy or that person the ammunition to cover up, right? To cover up their shortcomings. So when we first came into the truth, I was talking to my Ish about this, and I said, you know what's going to happen? And we laughed about it, but it's true, it happened. You know what's going to happen is that the more we start telling people, you need to know Hebrew, you need to stop doing Christmas, you need to do the feast days, you need to do this, and the less we focus on actually perfecting those things in our life, what's going to happen is Christian churches are going to start doing Passover, and they're going to start doing the feast days, and they're going to start using Yah's name, and they're going to begin to modify, while still being in paganism, their behavior, so that the woman who they know gets them their money, and probably they really like her at some point, they're going to start modifying their behavior so that the people stay in the congregation. And all this time, we're spending time focusing on them, and we're not walking in the right path, perfecting our walk so that Yah can literally bless us and put us in the place that we need to be in order to draw the people. We're so busy focusing on the woman who doesn't want to give up her man that our relationship is falling apart. And then we're garnishing things to us that are now making people look at us like we're crazy. So we need to focus on being holy and righteous, and by doing that, the people will then draw. Because honestly, we have been blessed in captivity as a people. It's happened throughout Scripture. And the thing that Yah understands about humans is that we're very, very physical. But when you're looking at the people who are supposed to be the chosen people, and they act more ignorant than people that you know who are caught up in paganism and idolatry, it makes it really difficult as a person who probably wants to get on this walk to do so. Because we are not really carrying out what the righteous walk is. Are we being the Josiahs? Are we, like, literally, because there's a way to be righteous and also be a little ignorant. Because Josiah, I would say, he was indignant for Yah. He was zealous for Yah. A lot of us are zealous against systems that have been put in place that we have no control over, and that's why we need a Hamashiach to destroy them. But we're not zealous for the word. We're zealous against something, but not zealous for something. So as we work to translate and become holy and righteous and set apart to this straight path, I really challenge a lot of us to really think about the bigger picture. And the bigger picture, obviously, for me, is always going to be the next generation, who needs to see people who have lived and walked in this walk and have done it in a way that makes them set apart, holy and righteous, and it makes them a light. They need to see our light shine, and right now, honestly, it's becoming very difficult to see how that's going to happen. Because with every movement, there is going to be those who are going to thwart the movement and make it difficult for those of us who really care about the next generation, keeping this truth and literally walking holy and righteous without even knowing about any of this makes it difficult. So my prayer is that through seeing this and this idea of holiness and righteousness and with those verses, that we really make the decision to not only be set apart and to be and know that we're Hebrew, but that we actually walk in the straight path and walk alongside Yah, so that he is the one who is along the path showing us and correcting us. I will add this one thing. In the Hebrew culture, if you walk the path and you stray or you stumble or you fall on the path, it's the job of the master to help you back on the path. Your idea sometimes, or people's idea of Yah, is very, very Western and very Anglo. And you have this angry God that you can't be corrected by. And Yah is all about correction. Children are corrected, and they are corrected because they have an innate humility. And so as those of you who are so afraid, and quite naturally we all have been when we first started walking on this walk, you're so afraid that you have to do everything perfectly or Yah is going to kill you. I'm not saying that you should not have fear, because fear is the beginning of wisdom and knowledge and understanding. But at the same time, don't be so afraid that you don't move, because fear can also be paralyzing if you don't understand who and what you are fearing. The Most High is to be feared and reverenced because he is high and holy and righteous and great, but at the same time he is Abba. And as you're walking and as you're trying to make these changes, do so wholeheartedly, so that if you do stumble or if you do need correction, it is done by him and others in love and not through his wrath. So I think that's where we need to be thinking. As you're carrying out your Shabbat and as you're reading, always first do what Yah said. First do what you read, and then after that, begin to figure out, okay, I was doing this, but then as I was walking in the Shabbat, I saw this. Or as I was walking in the feast day, I saw this. Or as I was walking out my life, I noticed this. But don't get so afraid of not doing it perfectly that you do nothing at all, because then you've never even gotten on the path and you're back over here being set apart, but never actually walking on the path of righteousness. So I want to encourage all you guys. I am excited to make another video because it's been a while. And I want you to be praying for me, because I have literally stepped into the belly of the beast. Like, I don't know another way to explain it that doesn't violate the privacy of myself and others, but I have, and I believe it's a part of this walk and this call. So keep my family in prayer. I'll be praying for you guys, and Shabbat Shalom.